the April 26th meeting of the Township Board, and the only reason it's called that is because it's today's April 26th and today's the meeting. So we'll start with the pledge to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, under additions to the posted agenda, does anyone have any suggested additions? Okay, I do. I'd like to have a rediscussion of the decision to put a crossing at Douglas Drive for that we passed last time, so I think there's a problem with it. I just wanted to discuss it again if the board's willing.
Okay.
The board, well, you'll need to take a vote of the board to add it to the agenda, and then decide where you want to put it on the agenda.
Okay, I'll ask the board if they're willing to do this.
Sure, I'll move.
Yeah.
And where should we put it, taking suggestions?
Well,
After we adjourn.
normally it'd be under engineering, planning, and zoning, so.
Okay, how about
Let's say
under
make it
engineering,
6B.
planning, and zoning?
Okay.
We'll do that. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Sorry for the late thing. I didn't notice it, didn't think about it until too late. Okay, next item is public comments. Did anyone come and want to talk to us about something that's not on the agenda? Sure.
This is the first time I've not come with a plan. So, no, I just wanted, just two things I want to say because I'm going to be away out of the country on May 10th, and I think that's Doug's last season. No, I'm going to embarrass him probably, but this is it'll be his last day, I think, and I want to say to the board, and I literally do stuff in every state, probably in the country, and you guys had a phenomenal manager as far as his knowledge. He always, I can tell you, always protected the township. We'd have some good discussions, but the other thing he really did well that I liked is that instead of saying, oh, no, he'd say, hey, let's see if we can figure out how to make this work rather than how not to make it work. And so I just want to say that. The second thing I'm going to ask, and I'd ask the board if they would consider, the reason all through Top Trees, the rails, the trails is there, is it was actually privately owned by my partner, and Doug kept insisting time after time how important it was to not just to Patton Township, but to the community to have that. And I went back multiple times, and he wouldn't quit. And we were eventually able to get my partner to make that contribution. I would love to see if you guys would consider at some point, so it doesn't get lost down the road, that the trail's going to be there for a long time for people to use. I'm sure it'll get improved. That if you guys would consider recognizing Doug in some form or fashion, because if it wasn't for Doug, it might not be there. Probably wouldn't be there. And I don't want anybody to forget that. And I think, Elliot, you were on the board at the time, and when we went through the whole process. And I think when this gets done in a few years, and people use it now, and you guys own it, it's going to mean a lot. And if it wasn't for Doug, I really don't think it would have happened, because it took me a lot to convince my partner. He said, Bob, I bought that land. I said, I'm asking you to, and it was Doug who wouldn't quit. So would you at least consider at some point in time and not forget about it?
Okay, let's put that on a future agenda. And second, I want to thank you for coming and
Yeah.
and telling us about that,
Yeah.
and making that so clear. It's very important.
Well, he's done well for the township.
Well, I just have to say, it's just by happenstance that the man who was bugging me about it, Phil Park,
Yeah.
is actually sitting back there too. So
I saw Phil getting out of his
he
car.
was the one poking me,
Yeah.
so I would poke you.
Yeah. Well, it worked, and it was the right thing to do. And that's the end of the day. That's what Doug, what I can say is that Doug has always done that. At the end of the day, I think always looking at the township first, he ended up doing the right thing. And so I just want to thank the board for,
Just one minor correction. I hope for completely that it's not Doug's last day. I just hope he's just retiring.
he's just retiring. Well, see, I won't be here, and I didn't want to miss at least thanking Doug for what you've done. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
Mr. Poole, if you would have a seat for a minute, and if the chair would allow me.
Should we see if there are any more public comments?
Yep.
Are there any more public comments? Anyone on Zoom that has a comment? Seeing none, we will move to presentations, and I'll turn this over to Pamela Robb.
Thank you. Mr. Poole, you jumped the gun for us. We too acknowledge the extraordinary work that Doug continues to do and has done. Give you a little history of Douglas E. Erickson, born and raised in Madison City, Iowa, Mason City High School, graduating in 1976, Iowa State University from 1977 through 1981 with a BS in civil engineering, Virginia Tech, 1994 through 1995 with a Master's Civic Engineering, Assistant Director of Public Service in the City of Bristol, Tennessee, 1995 to 1998, Public Works Director for Patton Township, May 1998 through they have February, but something's wrong with that. But no, that's right, February to 2026, Township Manager, Patton Township, February 2006 through May 2023, when we get there. During his 25 years of service to Patton Township, he was truly a public servant and putting his health and safety of our township residents and businesses at the forefront of everything he did. During his tenure as manager, he has the opportunity to work with 18 elected officials. One of the biggest accomplishments in his years of service serving the Patton Township manager was assuring $30 million in grants and funds for projects around the township. Other accomplishments were open space, acquisitions, and all the upgrades and additions to the Patton Township Park. I would like to give our Board of Supervisors an opportunity to tell Doug exactly what he means to this township as I get to the award. Anybody want to lead off?
Go ahead.
I'll start off. Yeah, Doug, this is certainly very bittersweet for me, because the whole time I've been on the board, you've been our manager, and of course, I knew you even before I came on the board because you were secretary for the Habitat for Humanity Board of Directors while I was a member of that board. Certainly, I'm always impressed and just blessed. I feel blessed that with your skill at guiding us, not directing us, but guiding us whenever we needed guidance, and keeping us up to date on everything. Your agendas are amazing. All the back history is in there. We don't have to do any research before our meetings because it's already here. I know from talking with your department directors, they really admire and respect you and all the work you've done. So, I wish you weren't retiring, but I understand the need. I'm retired myself. I would not go back to work at this point. So you should have look forward to your opportunities to engage in whatever you want to do from here on out. But if you stay in the area, I hope you do. If you do stay in the area, we certainly want to keep interacting with you as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everything that Dan said. But I want to add, I haven't worked with you as long, I guess, as Dan has, but I first met you actually before I was on the board, before I knew much even about what a board could do. And our neighborhood, I'll try to make the story short, maybe you can fill me in. But it was a private road, and we were supposed to maintain the road by contributing X dollars a year, which was great, except that down the road, as it were, we had to repave it. And if you did the simple math, which even I could do, we were not bringing in enough money to get that road paved. And there's no way that we could convince everybody to contribute the amount of money that you did to get it paved. So somebody reached out to Doug and said, do you have any ideas? He came to our meeting. And by that time, a bunch of people where we live weren't talking to each other. Okay, so the next thing I know, Doug had convinced the township to set it up as a neighborhood.
Improvement district.
There you see, I knew he would know it. And thank you so much for that. And he even convinced a neighboring township, which shall remain unnamed, because they were not quite as interested at the beginning. He convinced them to go along. So we're now the beneficiary of that problem solving. So really thank you. And everything that Dan said. It's been great.
Thank you, Beth.
Love those agendas.
I'm on the spot. No, I'm gonna keep this short, but yeah, I have only been, a second year or so, a sophomore into my political life. And, from the get-go, and I've given you this feedback before, Doug, from the get-go, you displayed nothing short of just like class, knowledge, wisdom, and sort of like assuredness too. Like, you know what you were doing, you did it well, and you wouldn't let anyone sort of tell you otherwise. And so for me, as a newly elected official, with a lot of angst about, the position, being able to get up to speed with things, I think that you really set the tone and sort of like steadied me, which allowed me then to be able to be open and receptive to learning and growing in this role. And so, again, you've definitely served as a model. I appreciate, again, just, the timeliness with which you've been able to be responsive to me. The level of detail, especially in the questions that I've asked, again, just has allowed me to, become more knowledgeable about different issues, but also, again, just serves as a model for how to be really good at what you do. And so, again, from the short time I've known you, I appreciate you. I thank you. You will be remembered, and just wish you all the best moving forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I guess I too have to echo my colleagues' appreciation of who you are. And for me, it's bittersweet because you extended yourself as a teacher and a mentor, and I will never forget that from you. So, without further ado, and people won't see you on that side, could you come to the front, Doug? Ellie, if you want
Am I allowed to say anything?
Go, I'm sorry.
That's all right. I don't have much to say, except that it's a rare person who is extremely knowledgeable, and yet who deals with people who can be involved with the township maybe 2 or 3 days a month, and still, it's not in your face. It's offering the information and help and giving you the nudge when it looks like one of them is suggesting something that isn't going to work, so that they don't feel like they were trampled on. But it's a very rare gift that you have for doing that, and it's just much appreciated.
Thank you.
Come on up front.
Okay.
25 years of service presented to Doug Harrison in recognition of your many years of dedicated service to Patton Township. Thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, I learned from, one of the men I consider the best, Tom Kurtz, who taught me a lot of things. I think Patton Township, it's been a pleasure, really a pleasure to serve here. We've accomplished many, many things together, and it takes us all working together to do things we've done. I don't know where you got those numbers. Yeah, I was even surprised when I added up the grants and equaled $30 million. But that's how we get Harrisburg involved in what we do here. And that's an investment. $30 million is an investment in this community. Bob was part of that. Jake Corman, Senator Jake Corman was a very important part of that. And every one of the 18 supervisors I've worked with is a part of that, as well as the staff here. I've got a great staff. They take care of, they take care of the stuff that they need to take care of and let me do the stuff that I enjoy doing, which is like working with Bob and working with the community and going out and getting grants and building things. So it's been a pleasure. It's been a real pleasure. I'm going to relax for a while.
But don't, just lay it flat. Don't want to, thank you. Okay, good.
Continuing along with the group that helps us get our costs down and does very quietly to us, but very importantly to the community. We'll talk about CNET with their annual report.
Well, I want to thank you, Doug, also for all you've done for the township. My name is Dave Gustine, and I'm representing Patton Township on the CNET Board of Directors. I think that goes back to about 2015. And I want to just do one introductory slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cindy Hahn because she knows all the details. So the next slide.
You're going to do it off the PDF,
Sorry.
Cindy.
Is that okay?
It's, is it
Is it
upside
too hard to read?
Well, we can try.
Thank you, Dave.
What do you?
Are you able to read the highlight slide taken from the paper? I can-
Probably not from there.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, so in 2022, 501 programs were produced by the CNET staff. Since last year, a new cable franchise was negotiated between Chemtel and State College Borough, also with Ferguson Township, and franchises with Patton Township, College Township, and Harris Township should or will be completed in 2023. Agreement was finalized with Penn State in April of last year to establish an annual minimum contribution to CNET from the university, $6,000 annually. There was significant staff turnover in August of 2022, resulting in a change of 2 out of 4 full-time positions. Both positions were filled by promoting within. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy to give you all the details.
Before you do that, I'd like to also thank your wife Diane for visiting tonight and for all of her support as you've done this work.
Thank you. My name is Cynthia Hahn. I'm the director of CNET. I placed tonight at your seats the annual report for 2022. I want you to note that on the cover, on the bottom row, we have Doug Erickson. So we've honored him in our special way. Is Mr. Poole still here? No. See, we beat him to it. Okay, so I'm going to start with, just to review your programming for last year. There were 19 supervisors meetings and 10 planning commission meetings. You may remember the township sponsored a program called God's Trombones that was a benefit for the Innocence Project of Pennsylvania. And then Patton Township for years has sponsored a quarter of the Penn State Department of Meteorology student programming for daily weather forecasts and then a weekly program that they have. Patton traditionally sponsors 25%, Harris Township has sponsored 25%, and Penn State pays for the remaining 50%. So that's a total of 34 programs. Along with that, there were 51 bulletin board messages last year. Generally, most of them are agendas. We value those as a tenth of a program, so that equates to another 5.1 programs of sponsorship. And if you add all that together, you come to 39.1 programs. Next. There we go. 39.1 total programs. So in 2022, the township sponsored 7.2% of all of the programming by all of CNET's members. It had been 8.4% in 2021. The reason for that is in 2021, you may recall the township arranged for CNET to produce 3 different affordable housing videos. In addition, that was the year that you sponsored some Spring Creek Watershed Commission programming, and the sponsorship of that rotates. So you did some of that in 2021, you will likely do more in 2023, and so years fluctuate depending just what is going on and what the township needs to sponsor. Next. So this little graph sort of shows you the last 5 years and what the township sort of bar graph looks like. And you can see last year was really the lowest year of the past 5 years, but 2021 had been a high. So you can sort of expect that fluctuation. When it comes to the 5-year period of 2018 to 2022, the township sponsored 8.35% of all of our member programming, and that is identical to what that was in 2017 through 2021. So years drop in and years drop out, but the township sponsorship is really quite consistent. And again, that 5-year period is important because we determine your financial contribution or your member dues based on a 5-year rolling average of programming. And this is what all of our members look like over the past 5 years. And I have an arrow pointing down there to Patton Township. So, you know, the largest user of our services is State College Borough. Center County government is generally in second place. And recently, Ferguson Township has been sort of in third place. But again, these figures vary. The 5-year rolling average helps us to keep things consistent for you with your dues because, you know, you have years drop in and drop out, and some years are busier than others for individual townships. So as a review of basically where to watch, your meetings are televised live on CNET Channel 7. They are streamed live on YouTube. They are rebroadcast on Saturday at noon, Monday at 6 a.m., and Tuesday at 12 a.m. Planning Commission meetings follow that same schedule on alternate weeks. And then, of course, all of the programming is on cnet1.org on demand, and we leave the programs there for 12 months, and they are indexed by agenda item. I just wanted to share with you next. All of the programs, all of the programming that we are now streaming live on YouTube. So all of the boards of supervisors or councils of our member municipalities are now streaming live, along with the State College Area School District, COG General Forum. And so we're doing more than ever. Most of the Penn State lectures that we cover are streamed live as well. So we're doing more than ever before of live streaming, and much of that is to the credit of Abby Wilson, who's sitting quietly in the back, but really has increased the YouTube programming greatly during her tenure. We also are on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. So people who have access to those platforms can watch the meetings and the programming as well. I wanted to give you, as I always do, some statistics about the average number of views for your meetings. In the 14-month period of January 22 through March of 23, an average of 75.3 views for your supervisors meetings, with another 61 on YouTube. The Patton Township Planning Commission is not quite as popular as you are. You can tell them that. They are receiving 68.2 average hits on our website, and another about 39 on YouTube. Please do keep in mind, this is only reflecting online views, not cable television data, which is, of course, proprietary and we do not have access to. Finally, just some tips that I always mention to try to make the coverage a little more successful. Please do keep in mind that your microphone should basically be pointing as closely to your mouth as you can, without it being inconvenient for you. Avoid leaning back too far from your mic, and insist that your presenters and your speakers come to the microphone. You're excellent at that. And when you're participating in a meeting in the room, if you have a computer, do mute your laptop microphone and speakers. And that really concludes the presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have.
I just want to ask if I've interpreted this correctly. I guess the previous slide, the average number of views per program is 75.
Right?
But that doesn't mean people view the entire thing, does it? Maybe they.
Oh, it doesn't necessarily mean that at all.
Okay.
That's right. And especially when we're chaptering them by agenda item, it really makes it easier for people to not do that, because most people will click on the agenda item that they're interested in.
Which is what I do. I very much appreciate that.
Good.
The agenda
Good.
item on there.
Good.
Yeah, that's quite an impressive outreach. Really, thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I know I forget, was it like a year ago, early on in my tenure, maybe I was talking to you or somebody, but just about the difficulties and sort of like coordinating meetings amongst all the different municipalities, and it may be somewhat taxing, I guess. And so if there was a way of like getting everyone together to try to agree on something, a schedule that may be more favorable to getting your peoples out, is that still an issue?
Well, I'll tell you, when Ferguson Township moved to Tuesday nights so that they could be live, because they had previously conflicted with State College Borough. So when they moved to Tuesday nights, that really helped us quite a bit. We know we rarely now have 5 shoot Mondays. Usually there are only 4 shoots. And so that did help. Patton Township is on Wednesday, Half Moon is on Thursday. I think our schedule works for us, frankly, as long as we acquire enough interns. And the past 2 semesters, we have been able to acquire enough interns, and the summer looks good now, too. Just like with anything, we went through a period where it was difficult to get interns. But as long as our staffing is okay, we're doing okay with our schedule.
Well, please let us know if we can be of help in any way, talking amongst the different municipalities about coordinating schedules and stuff.
Okay.
Please let
Okay.
us know.
Thank you. One of the best things you can do for us is continue to be consistent about where you meet. That's very helpful.
Yes.
Cindy, I just want to say thank you for being an extraordinary executive director for CNET. I know everything that you do, and our board appreciates your staff. The young people that continue faithfully, rain, sleet, snow, hail, they're here doing a job. And to let them know, we appreciate you. This staff and this board continues to appreciate each and every intern that you have and staff member. So please pass
Thank you.
that on. Thank you.
Sure will.
I'm gonna need y'all to get my good side next time, though.
I suppose you give the folks advice of not offering comments, but since they go to all these meetings, if any of them ever have an opinion about something that we're doing, I'd really like to hear it. Because
I will let them know that.
No, because how else do we find out
Yeah.
what people are thinking unless we ask? And
Sure.
there aren't that many opportunities that we have.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. This internship for them is not a political science internship or a community affairs internship. It is an audio-video production internship, but I will say that they leave knowing an awful lot about local government. And I feel pretty sure that a lot of them will move into or use that knowledge going forward, so.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very
I know I
much.
spoke already, but I wanted to just say kudos for the excellent training that you give the interns. In fact, I rather embarrassingly admit that it was several years before I realized that y'all were interns. Wow.
Good. Well,
job.
thank you, and really, again, the full-time staff does train the interns, and I will pass that on to them.
That's great.
Thank you, thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thanks very much.
And now, 1 week doesn't really do this justice, but we're going to talk about National Police Week and a proclamation.
Yeah, start in 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Day. That tradition has gone forward, and there are several law enforcement agencies now that recognize National Police Week. It's a collaborative effort of many organizations. So we put forward a proclamation that reads, whereas National Police Week in America has created to honor and recognize the sacrifice and contributions made by police officers and communities, both large and small. And whereas National Police Week, held every year in May, was created in 1962 through a proclamation issued by then President John F. Kennedy, which designated the week of May 13th to 19th, 1962 as Police Week. And whereas our community will always appreciate and commend the risk that police officers take every day to ensure our community's laws are properly enforced and that public safety is ensured. And whereas, now more than ever, the community also appreciates and encourages the community involvement facilitated by our police officers to both better serve and instill mutual trust, camaraderie, and positive relationships among our increasingly diverse population in Patton Township. And whereas police truly engage with and serve the public in the most varied and wide-ranging manner, and their efforts do not go unnoticed. Now, therefore, the Patton Township Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim the week of May 14th through May 20, 2023 as 2023 Police Officers Week in Patton Township, and encourages all residents to join the township in recognition of the services, sacrifices, and efforts the Patton Township Police Department makes to serve our community. Proclaim this 26th day of April 2023 by the Patton Township Board of Supervisors. And we ask that the board consider action to adopt that proclamation.
Anyone like to offer a motion to that
So
effect?
moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded and thirded, I guess. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So proclaimed. And now we'll inject a different topic here, Mount Nittany Health Week, which is May 8th through May 12th.
Right. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. My name is Kurt Kissinger, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Mount Nittany Health. And before I start, I just wanted to also congratulate Doug on his public service here to Patton Township throughout the years. I just started working at Mount Nittany Health a couple months ago, and we've not had the pleasure and opportunity to work together, but I know Doug was very instrumental in working with Tom Charles, my predecessor, and the entire Mount Nittany Health team on the outpatient center project. So thank you, Doug, again for your service. So as you know, Mount Nittany Health has been around for over 120 years in providing care to the residents of Patton Township and throughout the Center County region. What started as an 8-bed infirmary in a Victorian home in Bellefonte has evolved into a vibrant, independent, community-governed community health system with 2,400 employees and over 220 providers delivering care across 19 locations here in our region. And along that journey, we've always reinvested in the communities that we serve, just like the outpatient center over at Toft Trees West. And I'm pleased to report that construction on that project is coming along as planned, and we want to thank you for your cooperation and support to make that facility a reality as we try and expand access to health care for residents in Patton Township and beyond. Mount Nittany Health Week is really about the Mount Nittany Health team and the excellent care that they provide and compassionate care to the patients at Mount Nittany Health and throughout the community. And so it's a fun-filled week of lots of activities, recognitions, and food for the employees and the providers, not just at the medical center, but across our 19 locations. There's lots of games, a gift basket raffle, recognition for employees on milestones throughout their career. And so we're very delighted to take the time to recognize all the great work that they do. And it also serves as a reminder to us to say thank you to the community for all of its support for our caregivers and the employees, and to be able to allow us to fulfill our mission of healthier people and stronger community. That's what we're about. And so thank you for the opportunity to take this time to recognize the many accomplishments of the employees at Mount Nittany Health during Mount Nittany Health Week. Thank you.
And with that, we have a proclamation here that where we can officially recognize this. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, we're going to read it.
I guess we can read it.
I'll go, sure. Proclamation, Township of Patton, celebrating Mount Nittany Health Week 2023 and thanking the board, leadership, and team of Mount Nittany Health for their enduring legacy of service to the community. Whereas Mount Nittany Health is the community's locally governed health system with a mission of healthier people, stronger community, and whereas Mount Nittany Health, with its 2,400 employees, 220 providers, and 19 locations, has provided more than 120 years of service and outstanding health care to our region. And whereas Mount Nittany Health is a trusted partner in our region's growth and development and has honored this partnership through continual investments in people, programs, technology, and facilities to ensure the community is well served for future generations. And whereas the Mount Nittany Health team brings compassion, expertise, and ongoing commitment to caring for our families, neighbors, and friends. Now therefore, the Board of Supervisors of the Township of Patton hereby proclaims that May 8th to 12th will be Mount Nittany Health Week 2023, and joins with the Mount Nittany Health Team in celebrating Mount Nittany Health Week 2023, and commends the board, leadership, and entire Mount Nittany Health Team for its record of service to the region, and resolves that an authenticated copy of this resolution will be provided to Mount Nittany Health, proclaimed this 26th day of April 2023.
We had a second, premature, but that's fine. Any comments? All in favor?
I have a comment.
Opposed? Oh, go ahead.
So thanks for the presentation. I feel talkative today. Yeah, I'm all in, support of, yeah, you can come back up if you want. All in support of honoring our healthcare workers, and I'm glad that the workers, employees were centered, in this proclamation as opposed to just the larger, entity of Mount Nittany. I'm aware, and I know you likely can't speak to any of this right now, but a recent article about a class action lawsuit targeting Mount Nittany concerning data breach, privacy issues, data breach. And so I'm hopeful that those complaints are unfounded and nothing comes of that. But if there is something there, I'm just hopeful that the entity of Mount Nittany is responsive to that and make sure that, patient care doesn't just come with, the direct interactions with them, but also, technology and stuff like that. So I'm hopeful anything there is remedied should it need to be. But that's my thought.
Yeah, no, thank you. You are correct. I cannot comment on pending litigation, but we do take very seriously privacy of patient information at Mount Nittany Health. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, all in favor of the? You voted. Okay. In view of keeping things private, I will tell about a compassionate person working at our health facility. A woman had headaches and went to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed these pills to take each night. And she's supposed to take one each night. Fourth night, she looks in the mirror, she thinks something's wrong, but how could it be these pills? But the fifth night, she's pretty sure, starts measuring herself and taking these pills. She's losing a 1/4 inch of height each night. Panicked, she goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, these pills are great for my headaches, but they're making me shrink." And she is a compassionate person, the doctor, and she says, "Don't worry about it. You just have to be a little patient." There aren't that many opportunities at board meetings to tell medical jokes. So,
Moving on.
moving right along, we're now up to the next page, which I'll go to. Financial statement.
Okay. As you know, as I told you in the last meeting, that our annual financial statements were close to being completed. They were completed at the end of last week. I'm happy to report that there was an unqualified opinion. There was no findings. I've asked the auditors, Jeff Walker and James Bereshevsky, to report on the financial statements. So I think they're out there. And if they could chime in and give us a report on the financial statements. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. I am, as Larry said, Jeff Walker. I'm principal here at Brown Schultz, and responsible for the audit of Patton Township. And again, with me is Jim Barczewski. Related to the Patton Township audit, as Larry mentioned, it is a clean or an unmodified opinion, which really means that as far as we're concerned, the financial statements as they're presented are materially correct. They are not materially misstated in any way, which is a clean opinion, the opinion that we want to give to you, and you as the board, it should be the opinion that you would like to hear. That means that everything is on the up and up from a financial standpoint within the township. In terms of the audit process itself, the audit of a government is rather time consuming. There are rather large financial statements, about 60 pages long. It does take a lot of time to get it together. So I just want to take a quick minute to thank Doug, Larry, and his finance team for helping us go through the process to get the audit done, really in about a 3.5 period, which is pretty impressive for townships, especially one of the size that is Patton. So thank you to them for that. As part of our audit, we do assess the internal controls of Patton Township. We don't give an opinion on internal controls, we're not allowed to, but what we do is we assess the internal controls for our purposes to develop audit procedures that are proper in the actual circumstances related to the audit. So if we were to find something that was wrong with internal control or a weakness or something that we thought could be improved upon, we would report that to you in a separate letter that would accompany these financial statements. I'm happy to report that there is no separate letter because there was nothing that we found related to the internal controls of Patton Township that we thought were a weakness in any way that would need to be reported to you. So as far as that's concerned, everything, again, how the finances work within a township are pretty well ran. Our audit process really involves the review of the detailed records of the township, confirming certain accounts, bank balances, tax confirmations, tax revenues, things to that extent. We also examine transactions on a test basis to ensure that they are properly recorded within the accounting system itself, in the proper fund, within the correct expense area, and things of that nature. If we find anything like that, we would recommend a correction, but again, really nothing that we found, any material misstatements or anything like that. So a clean opinion again for the financial statements. The total statement themselves, as I mentioned, are about 60 pages long, which is a long read, especially for people who don't maybe have a finance background. So if you do want to make an assessment of the township, I do recommend that you read the first few pages, which is called Management's Discussion and Analysis. What that is basically it's a Reader's Digest or Cliff Notes version of the financial statements that's written by Larry and reviewed by us. And it's really just a detailed summary of what you would find in the remaining 45 pages that accompany the financial statements. Talks about where the township is, how it got there, where large items might be, your fixed assets, revenues, fund balances, and things of that nature. It's comparative to the prior year. This is the only spot in the financial statements we actually see comparative information. So that's also beneficial when you do go through it. Speaking briefly to the numbers, it was a pretty positive year for the township. All the funds that are major, the general fund, Parks and Rec, open space, things of that event, all had an increase in fund balance or a profit, essentially, which means, no fund balance was used to cover any operations, things of that nature. About a $520,000 increase in those fund balances combined. Your general fund has about $1.2 million available to be used. Parks and Rec has about $485,000, and open space about $1.4 million. So a pretty positive spot for the township to be in. Those aren't excessive numbers as well, which means those aren't incredibly high tax rates where you're paying in taxes as a resident and that money's not being used. So it's also positive to see that while you do have money to use, it's not an excess of cash that's just sitting around in coffers waiting to be used at a later date. So all told, for the financial statements of Patton Township, it is a pretty positive result for the year. Again, an unmodified or clean opinion. So are there any questions on the financial statements themselves? I don't want to go through them in detail. There's a lot in there. But as far as it really goes, the numbers are positive. And again, it is a clean audit opinion, which is really what you should want to hear as the board.
Any questions? I'm sure you all read it from front to back, as I have. It's pretty exciting reading, so.
If you can't sleep, I recommend the first 2 or 3 pages, and you'll be right out.
Exactly.
No comments?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jeff and Jim, for everything you guys do. You do a wonderful job on the audit, and we appreciate all your help throughout the year.
Thank you. Doug, good luck in retirement.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jim. Been good working with you guys.
Have the best evening you've ever had till tomorrow.
Thanks.
Okay, moving right along then. Next is public safety, and Chief has some concerns about one of the items here, which I guess is coming up under the Center Region rental housing and building safety. I didn't exactly see what that was, but I guess you'll hear about that.
To that, yeah. So we have from the Ashcraft family a request for a noise waiver and temporary use permit. This is, I think, the 4th, maybe 5th year that they've held this event. We haven't had any complaints or anything for the last 2 or 3 years. Again, it's at their farm, which is in the 3400, 3500 block of Buffalo Run Road. They have 2 days of racing with historic racing motorcycles. There was a letter from Lisa Ashcraft involved, kind of describing the event. They will have people camping over. Noted it's primarily a family event. They do have emergency medical services on site as well as sanitary facilities. And again, staff has no objection to this, and would turn it over and note that they've held this, like I said, held this event for the last 3 or 4 years, and no issues one way with noise or anything else with it. We would recommend approval of the noise waiver from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for Saturday.
Would anyone like to introduce such a motion?
So moved.
Second. Comments?
Have fun.
Okay, all that,
You did.
we did.
I did.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And next is consultant services for the acquisition and implementation of new public safety records management system, which is being done region-wide.
Yep, and I'm going to take this one. And as Dan mentioned earlier, Doug does a fantastic job of giving you all the information in the agenda here, but really what he's written is what we're after here. But Patton Township Police Department, Ferguson, State College Borough, and Penn State are all part of a consortium. We all work together and are part owners of a records management system. We are coming to the end of life of the system we currently have, so we are starting the process of looking for a new records management system. And we have already signed an MOU to stay together as that consortium, so the 4 agencies will continue to work together. But as the first step to move into this new records management system, we thought it would be wise to hire a consultant to help us with the steps of moving forward with this project. So that process, we did put out an RFP. We received 6 responses to that RFP. We narrowed that down to 2 vendors. We had them come in and provide presentation and a draft statement of work. And we have a selection committee that has representation from all the agencies that are in the consortium. That selection committee has chosen PRI Management Group as the best vendor to meet the needs for this project. The quoted price for the scope of work is $167,400. Patton Township is a 12.5% owner of the system. So our portion of that would amount to $20,925. We did put a capital improvement plan in 2022, and we had budgeted $41,250 for this project. So this project came in about half of what we had budgeted at that time. But yeah, so for this, I'm just asking that the board consider action by motion to approve the township's portion of the contract and to authorize the chair to execute the agreement on behalf of the township following the review of the document by our township solicitor.
Is there such a motion?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion?
Yeah. So Chief, the request for proposal for consulting and project management assistance for the records management system. So would this consultant be providing the record management system or just recommending what type of RMS to
No,
use?
so they will help us identify the system, a good system for us to move to. So basically all the steps of identifying the different vendors that are out there, coming up with the labs for us to experience their systems to see what's going to be the best fit. The whole way through the go live for the event, they'll provide support, but they will not actually provide the records management
It'll
system.
be the go-between us and the vendor.
And it's common practice for this to happen?
It's almost life. It's almost required because these systems are so complex.
Okay.
You need somebody who understands them, what the vendor can do, and, you know, what our needs are, so they'll help the vendor design the system
Okay.
also.
And then the 12.5% ownership, is that just based on like our police force
Size,
size
yeah,
and
Penn,
stuff?
Penn State's 50%, State College Borough is 25%, Patton and Ferguson are 12.5%. That's the way the MOU's been written for the last few systems as we've been a consortium, so.
Let me follow up on that then. Okay, so this is a consulting group. So they identify a provider, a service provider. What are we expecting to pay the service provider now? I assume it's going to be quite $1 million or something like that.
So typically, our last system was 900,000, but luckily, there's grant money out there. We're anticipating this next system to cost in the neighborhood of 1.2 million. The State College Borough did secure a grant through PCCD that it should cover just about the entire amount of that.
And, okay, I'm trying to understand. Are we paying any money now for records management to another provider or something?
The vendor we currently have on a yearly basis, so we did pay up front for the system we're currently using 6 years ago.
Right.
So that's the only money we're paying for right now is maintenance for that current system. This is going to be, again, a separate vendor. So right now our vendor is Motorola, and we'll be looking to probably select a different vendor for the next system, and that's where that 1.2 million price tag we're anticipating will probably be.
And so it will probably be paying more for a new vendor, a new contract than we're currently paying.
The price tag on the system will probably be more, but we have a grant that should pay the entire price tag for that.
So there'll be some annual maintenance fees going on forward. And typically what happens is these systems are good for 5 to 8 years, and then the vendors stop supporting them because the technology changes. So they go to a new system, and what we found in the past is we're fairly unique with several departments and municipalities working together, and sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge for vendors to do that, although they're getting better with that too. And also with the last one, they had to actually build a whole module to accommodate the Clery record-keeping function that the university must do. So, so you stick around, we'll go through this every 6 to 8 years.
Not me.
From now forever. Yeah, this is either my third or fourth go around on this, but yeah, we tried doing it once without a consultant, and it didn't work out that well. I mean, it's just, it's hard for, nobody really at any of the current departments, even at the university, has really the time to put together toward, and the knowledge both of police services and the information technology that they can cover everything that we really need the consultant to do. So the consultant will bring several different people into their team who will work on separate pieces for us. But we found over time that it really helps a lot to have a consultant of this type to assist us with the full process.
Okay.
And so does any of this grant money go to the price of hiring the consultant, or that just needs to come?
Specifically just for the records management system.
Yeah, no, the grant money is just for this, when we buy the system. So.
Okay.
So the consultant will actually talk to the different departments, including ours, about things that they're concerned about and where it may not be working now, but expect to work in the future.
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a big deal.
And, and the consultant will be the one who will remember that the vendor promised to do something, and when the vendor doesn't promise to do something, then it's the consultant's job to remind the vendor and press the vendor to do what they promised they were going to do. So they're like they'll be like a project manager. think of it in terms of a construction project. We are representative with the contractors, the vendors, making sure they follow all do everything they promise to do.
So to get this going, we need a motion to approve this idea and authorize it.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I have a quick question.
Well, it doesn't have to be quick, you can take as long as you want.
So I just want to be clear that the 167.4 is essentially, say we get a system for 6 years, that covers the 6 years?
No, that's for the consultant probably for 2 years, isn't that? what it
Yeah,
was
so
written?
that's the total price for the consultant, and their service, we expect the contract to be 2 years in
Oh, I see what
length.
you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then
So-
that would be broken down, again, 50% university,
Okay.
25 borough,
So
12.5 for us.
and the assumption is that after 2 years, all of the glitches will have been worked out? We won't
Correct.
need a consultant?
We should be
Okay.
in our new system and moving down the road at that point, hopefully.
Okay,
So
I don't think that quite happened with the last system. Do I remember correctly?
that's one of the reasons why we're moving forward.
Okay,
Correct.
gotcha.
Yes.
And then the 1.2 million, that obviously covers the 6 years or 8 years, whatever.
Well, no, that's the cost, that's the upfront cost.
For every year?
No, for
This is
for the software, and then there'll
Right.
be an annual maintenance fee that's probably gonna be total around 100,000 a year, I
Oh,
would
okay.
bet. So we'll probably have an ongoing forward, like 12,500 or something like that.
Okay, got it.
Might be
Thank
a
you for
little
that.
more.
Any other comments or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Uncertain? Okay, it passes unanimously.
Chief, can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Is it standard for like Penn State when we like share things with Penn State for it to be like 50% Penn State and then portioned out? I guess this is with any project.
There's no advantage for us to own it, other than it's our share of the project.
Yeah, I just meant with.
I don't even think it goes on our asset sheet, does it? No.
Yeah, I just meant with all the different like partnerships it seems like we may have with Penn State. I've been hearing like it seems like they have like 50% or some. I think CNET even talked about this with something 50% Penn State.
Penn State, because they're a university system or university law enforcement agency, has a lot of NCAA reporting requirements that we don't have at the municipal level. So, well, we have some of those too. Anytime our police interact with a Penn State student, then Penn State police have to come collect that information from us. So that's primarily why Penn State has the biggest share of it, is more of the record keeping falls on them.
Okay.
They've brought all the Commonwealth campuses on board too, so
No,
they
that's-
have a very large agency now. So they do make up the lion's share of, as far as how many officers utilize the software, things like that. They're the majority, for sure.
Forgotten about that.
And so we got into this consortium, say 6 years ago?
Oh,
Or whatever the current agreement is.
It's
Over
been
20
two-
years.
Yeah, 2 systems ago, I believe, so about 20 years probably, yeah.
Yeah, so I know it seems like a small amount, but like, I guess Penn State's been getting larger, and if they're taking up, using this resource more than, we are, it seems like that 12.5%, does that need to be recalculated at some point? Not saying this needs to happen now, but, yeah, it just seems interesting that that's our portion of it.
Yeah, good point to keep in mind. I think everybody's happy currently, but good point to keep in mind.
Bring it up again. 6,
I'll bring it up again in 6 years.
I think
only wait 5.
our share was a little higher before, wasn't it? We had 17 and a half at one point or
I think it
something like
was, it used to be a little bit higher, so it has dropped down. That was before I took over, so I do
Yeah.
remember it being a little bit higher than 12.5% though, so.
that. Yeah, I think at one point it was like 2/3 university and Penn State split 2/3 and we split 1/3 with Ferguson. So we would have been whatever a half of a third is, 16 and a quarter or something like that. So,
Wherever we can save money.
us, at least for the moment, to the end of the public safety discussion. And we're adding B to the next one, which will be looking at the intersection I mentioned before. But former supervisor who taught me anything I know years ago has a concern now with the Cricklewood Drive pedestrian alternatives. We'll talk about that.
Yes, thank you. Tonight, we have with us Carl Schellenberger from Buchard Horn, our consultant that we engaged to do this analysis, to give a presentation.
First off, I want to congratulate Doug on his retirement. As Alex said, I'm Carl Schellenberger with Buchard Horn. Just wanted to give a quick overview of this project we've been working on in the past several months. We were tasked with developing and analyzing a couple alternatives to improve bicycle and pedestrian facilities along the entire length of Cricklewood Drive and Toft Trees. We did this by having 2 public meetings and 2 online surveys to gather input from the public. We also worked with the Recreation Advisory Committee and township staff to ultimately come up with one recommended alternative, which would be to narrow the lanes on Cricklewood Drive, then install a grass strip and a shared use path on one side of the road. In the areas that currently have sidewalks, it would just widen the sidewalk on one side of the road on the south side to allow more space for bicycles and pedestrians to pass through that area. We prepared this report that's up on the screen. I don't know if you had a chance to look through it, but it kind of details the process of how we came to our recommended alternative. And as detailed in the agenda, at the meeting last week, the Recreation Advisory Committee did recommend this selected alternative to be approved by the board if you choose to do so. So if you have any questions, I can answer them or go into more details. Let me know.
It looks fine to me. It looks good to me to have the paths not part of the travel lane. But what happens to the traffic calming device that we currently have? We'll have to take those out, right?
They have to come out.
So it'll just be a regular 2-lane road.
Correct.
With no traffic calming.
Correct.
So the lanes would be narrowed, which would help, and the shoulders would be eliminated as well for the most part. So it would reduce speed in that, by doing that.
So Alex, are we anticipating we're going to have a need for traffic, some other kind of traffic calming once you remove those median barriers?
We will recheck the speeds after the installation of the project because, as Carl stated, the lanes will be narrower, so that should also help with speeds. So, yes.
Yeah, even with the traffic calming devices in place, really the average speed is still probably what, 32 or 33 miles an hour?
Over the speed limit, yes.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
It won't be my problem because it's, I'm just anticipating we'll be, the board at that time will be revisiting this issue when you start getting citizens' complaints about car speeding on Cricklewood Drive again.
Yeah. The pedestrian complaints came out about mainly because when we put the traffic calming, the center dividers in, we narrowed that shoulder, quote-unquote, shoulder area by a foot or foot and a half, and that made pedestrians feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So a lot of that was, I mean, this started off as a traffic calming project and ended up as a pedestrian access project. So, as Alex said, the best thing we can do is, once we find the money to implement this, if we decide to go ahead with it, we'll go back out and do more speed surveys and see what it is, see what the speed is. But I think one of the things we're going to have to do is educate people that, we're never going to get the speed. We're never going to get half the people to go 25 miles or slower. It's just an unrealistic expectation anymore. If we can get them we can keep the average speed down about, 32, 33 or something like that, that's probably as good as you're gonna do. And that means the 85th percentile speed's probably 35 or more. But, I mean, the other thing we do is you look at crash statistics too, and we'll find, I don't think we have any issues with pedestrian and vehicle conflicts out there. So the perception of the problem is, I think, somewhat worse than what it actually is.
Well, I like this alternative 4. I think that's a perfect solution. Separate the multi-use path from the travel lane, the car travel lanes. So as long as the right-of-way, is wide enough and there's enough, it's not going to impede on any of the property owners, the lot owners, because you already own the right-of-way. You don't have to ask for any easements from any private property owner.
Yeah, that is correct. Nothing, correct, Carl?
That's
We're not
correct.
going outside of the 60-foot right-of-way.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Phil, you've been involved with this since before the century began. Do you have any comments?
Phil Park, I live at the corner of Cricklewood and, where am I? North Parkway. Thank you. When the western end of the bypass was first built, there was no interchange at Wattle Road. And Doug's predecessor, Tom Kurtz, managed to set up a meeting that I attended along with Senator Doyle Corman and the then Secretary of Transportation, a fellow by the name of Tom Larson, and we were advocating for building an interchange on Wattle Road. PennDOT wasn't enthusiastic about it. Tom Larson said he didn't have all the money for it, and it led to the first public-private partnership in Pennsylvania for the development of a highway facility. There were developers who threw in money into this project to build an interchange at Wattle Road. It only cost $1 million. That was a while ago. The premise behind this was with the interchange, there would be economic development and jobs. We got the economic development, we got the jobs, and we got the traffic. And so I very much appreciate the sincere effort that Doug and the entire township have taken to try to help fix a problem that I helped create. I'm optimistic, and I look forward to seeing this done. I would like to point out, yes, Doug, you're not going to get everybody to slow down, but from years ago, the State College Police established a considerable presence on Westerly Parkway. And the effect of that is most people who know about Westerly Parkway don't speed there. We have 3,300 vehicles a day going through Cricklewood Drive. 15% of those are exceeding the speed limit. That's 400 vehicles a day. That's one of the reasons that the pedestrians are upset about this, and I think this will be good to separate both the pedestrian and police traffic. So I'm very much in favor of this. I think we're doing the right thing here. I would also like to add a personal note. Congratulations, Doug. I remember when he was hired, and I'm saying to myself, who can replace John McNiss? Well, I found out, and he was an excellent replacement. Doug has been pragmatic, practical, and he's been grounded in all of this. And it's just a refreshing way to see somebody do business. He also had the good sense to send his son to my wife's Montessori preschool kindergarten. So, thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Bill, do you remember Bob Donaldson, the director of planning at the county?
Very well.
You know, we'd ask Bob, can you give us some background on that? And Bob would say, in 1962, North Atherton Street was a 2-lane road. And that's where Bob would start with his background.
Also, our son went to the same Montessori school and later became the director of research for a bank, doing research on East Asia, using the arithmetic lessons he learned at the Montessori school. In any case, we ready to?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. That's an interesting thought about having police presence, obviously, to slow that traffic. Is that something we considered or did?
Oh, we do, yeah. We have a couple zones set up on Cricklewood, and we only have typically 2 officers out at a time, so we try to get to as many neighborhoods as we can get to. But Cricklewood is one that we offer quite a bit of attention to.
How about we just have CNET posted out there broadcasting the whole time? Thoughts, interns? Oh.
I see our solicitor is
Take it back to Cindy.
So Tim, we did have a speed sign out there for a long time. You know, the your speed is, and it did help for a little while, and then I think people just kind of eventually,
Yeah,
it's what happens.
they get used to it
you know.
being there. And
We've been trying all kinds of things to slow people down.
Okay, well, we have a motion, I guess, to,
No, we don't have a motion yet.
don't we?
Oh, no, not yet. I will move to accept the recommendation of the Recreation Advisory Committee to proceed with alternative number 4.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion?
I have a couple of questions.
No, you had a couple of questions. Go right ahead.
The parking along Cricklewood Drive, that was a little confusing. I was trying to figure out what was going to be lost and gained and kept with
So
this.
all of the existing lined parking where the sidewalks are in front of the ale house, they would remain, all those spots.
Okay, that's,
We did look at some other options in other areas that could widen the road to provide some more parking, particularly towards the apartments that are closer to Fox Hollow.
right,
Because a lot of people do park on the street there.
yeah.
And those are kind of the decisions that would need to be made during the final design.
Okay.
And we did not discuss anything with those apartment owners. But we did, at the first public meeting, the owner of the ale house was here at the meeting and was very concerned about losing parking. And we said that none of the lined parking spaces would be lost because that was part of their land development plan, as far as I know. Those spots were designated for them.
Because my understanding is that cars lined up along the side of the road are also traffic calming.
Yes.
Have a traffic calming effect, okay. Yeah, alrighty. Oh, and what's, I've forgotten the timeline for putting this in,
That kind of really all depends on funding and what the township wants to do as far as how fast you want to move forward.
okay, gotcha, so that
Yeah, I think, do we have money for design?
involves in
I
our
couldn't, I forgot checking.
Not till
I know-
next year, not till next year.
Okay, so we have money in 2024 for design, and then I think the construction was scheduled in the CIP for 2025, but I think it was matched with grant money, so we'll have to start looking for grant opportunities between now and then. Unless the township, it's a future question, when the CIP comes up for this year, for next year, y'all can look at that and, juggle, do you need the grant funding, or you want to proceed without the grant funding? Obviously, we'll have some better cost estimates at that point. Nothing says it all has to be done in 1 year either, so it could be something that could be phased over several years. We're pretty famous for doing things like that.
You mentioned, are you done?
I am, thanks, yeah.
You mentioned needing to speak with the apartment owners.
If it went to design, that's probably something that should be done, just to find out what their parking needs are. Every time I go through there, I see that there's cars parked on the street. I think there are not enough spaces in some of those lots for the number
Yeah,
of
they're
cars.
fairly old. They were built, I think, when the requirement for parking was 1.5 spaces per unit instead of the current 2.3 spaces. So they do a permit parking system, so, I mean, we'll want to take a look at their parking at some point, do a parking survey, see how many empty spaces they have, see what their real need might be too, so.
Anyone else? Okay, so we've taken care of that item for the moment, but thank you. We haven't voted yet, though. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Not done then.
Thank you.
The one item, next item is the proposed crossing at Douglas Drive, and I come down that way fairly frequently, and if you're standing in the middle of the street, there's no problem with the sight distance either up the hill or down the hill. But coming down the hill, Douglas Drive is pretty well hidden, the cul-de-sac there, and you're on a hill there, and there's a crossing just 100 or so yards past there that the school district has put in. And so it seems to me there's an invitation to disaster there from the people coming down that hill if we don't do something other than just say, okay, we're putting a crossing in here.
This is something we discussed at the last meeting.
Yes.
So you're talking just about Douglas Drive?
All right.
I don't think of Douglas Drive as having a hill.
We discussed the Sandy Ridge crossing. There was a report in the agenda,
I got the Sandy Ridge.
correct, and our traffic engineer looked at site distance at Sandy Ridge and
Yes.
determined that it was inadequate.
Yeah, I saw that, but
Provide a
you're talking
crossing.
about Douglas Drive?
Yes,
Yeah.
he said that so Douglas could be pursued as far as a crossing because there was adequate site distance.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So that's as far as the report went with
I'm
it.
just confused, though. I thought you were talking about a hill on Douglas Drive.
No, there's a hill downhill on Valley Vista.
Oh,
heading
that comes out
northwest.
at Douglas Drive.
Right.
Okay.
And at the bottom of the hill is a crossing that's already there. It
I
includes
see. Sorry, I was, gotcha.
a
Okay. I'm not on board.
it's a light that could be turned on by the school for crossing there.
Yeah. that
The
was-
flashing beacon that's,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Is your concern that you think we need a beacon there, or that we shouldn't have anything there at all, or?
Well, I consider actually using that intersection the crossing that's already at the bottom there.
so there's no sidewalk connectivity on
Yeah,
the other
there's-
side of the road.
There's nothing on the other side except the school field.
Okay,
So the logic behind, or the thought behind crossing at Douglas Drive is we would connect the people straight into the cul-de-sac at Douglas, the bicyclists to the cul-de-sac at Douglas Drive to get into Park Forest.
Not so much coming out,
Pardon?
not so much coming out of,
Well, either way, they can go either way, but the crossing there that's currently there is really for school students going from the middle school over to the
Right.
school district's property on the other side of Valley Vista.
was anyone else driven there and seen this?
I'm with Elliot's concern, probably, can we revisit?
Well, we can go back and look and see, we'd have to build, I don't know how many, 300 feet of bikeway on the Park Forest side of Valley Vista.
Okay.
So I don't think we have right-of-way on that side, so we'd have to acquire additional right. I mean, we can go back and do a little cost estimating to see what that might cost.
Okay.
But I think the shortest distance between 2 points was just to make another crossing at Douglas Drive.
And so I wasn't at the previous meeting. What's the issue? I know the area we're talking about.
When you're coming down the hill toward, if you wanted to turn into the, that side of Circleville Road, I know that people don't go the speed limit, and you don't expect to see a crossing there because there's no street. And so we'll have to sign it properly so that people notice that there's something there that could be a hazard. I wouldn't want to walk across there without that, or ride a bike there.
Yeah, well, I believe they based the sight distance on the actual speed of the traffic there, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, so they didn't use 35 miles an hour. They didn't assume traffic was going 35 miles an hour. They actually went out.
45.
So so at 45 miles an hour, there's still sufficient sight distance.
The grade on Valley Vista isn't considered part of that?
Pardon?
The
Yes,
grade.
yes. Yeah, they consider the grade and the speed of traffic. So remember, sight distance means if you step out in the road, the next car coming, has enough time to actually come to a full and complete stop before it gets to that crossing. So it's a fairly conservative safety standard. And yes, there'll be signs there. There'll be signs just like there are at the current one. If you'd like staff, to put the flashing beacons up probably is $40,000 around that. So.
Okay, well, I'm not directly affected because I do indoor cycling, and the reason I do that is because no matter how far you go, it's not far to get back. But I am concerned about anybody. I don't want to create another hazard.
And that's why we did the feasibility study first, to see if it was safe. Really, is it safe? Because we don't want to put anybody in an unsafe condition. So, yeah, they looked at the grade, they looked at the speed of traffic, and, yes, the traffic, it is safe as long as you don't step in front of a car.
Doug, when they're doing their study, is there a specific time that they're making their report when they're saying visibility time? Is it at 9 a.m. when traffic is,
Well, they're doing it by a scientific sampling method, let me put it that way. So, everything that the traffic engineers do, they do in accordance with these manuals that are, and these methodologies that are approved and used all over the country. So, I couldn't tell you exactly when they're sampling, but they're sampling enough cars. They're measuring the speed of enough cars, so they know that every other sample is going to be really close to what they got. So, yeah, they're giving us good information, let me put it that way. We can count on the information they're giving us.
You had a question?
I just wanted us to give another look, and it looks like we'll keep the current plan then.
Okay. We'll turn them loose here as soon as we get an agreement together with them, so.
Okay, now we're up to administration, but we'll have a 3-minute break between this and the next part of the meeting.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go.
And the next item is
Gavel's back in.
Council of Governments Capital Improvement Plan Review. And one item that we've already talked about or thought about is what the boardwalk at the Millbrook Marsh, but who's going to lead this?
Well, I'll start.
Do you want to start it and then I'll chime in?
Well, why don't you talk about the overall issues and I'll talk about my comments, which are more
Okay,
specific.
so, see this page on the CIP, can you bring that up? It's like page 2. So, when the CIP came on last month, or I guess earlier this month, I was in the Facilities Committee and I was in the Finance Committee. I think it was a joint committee, actually. And I spoke about the CIP, and I just want to reiterate what I said in that meeting. So there's this graph on page 2 of the CIP called Shares by Municipality. When it came out, it showed from 2024 to 2028, and I asked them if they could put 2023 on the graph to give us some history. Where are we at today, and where are we going? So this line here, this dashed line, that it's hard to tell what color it is, but the one I'm highlighting, it's the third line down from the top. That's Patton Township. So you can see that Patton Township currently, we're at $416,000 a year that we're given for the CIP. It goes to $429 in 2024, so that's a 3% increase. Then you'll see this big jump. And I made the comment in the meeting about that big jump. And that big jump is a 19% increase, where we go from $429,000 for the year 2024 to almost $510,000 in 2025, and then we steadily go up between 4.5% to 5% every year after that. I don't think we can afford that and not raise taxes. I just don't think we have enough of a organic growth in Patton Township to absorb a 19% increase in the year 2025, and then 5% increases every year. And remember, this is only a portion of what we pay to COG. This is only the items that are on the CIP. You know, in total, we're spending COG like $1.4 million. So that's all gonna go up in addition. So that was my big comment to them, was I was concerned about this big jump and then the considering, so could they spread out something or relook at it? My second comment being on the Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk, where they were gonna spend $7 million in 1 year, where they don't know how they're gonna get it. They're talking about borrowing money, and I'm not sure right now we wanna borrow money, which I think the Fed's gonna raise interest rates again sometime within the next week to week and a half. So now is not the time to be borrowing money, because it's expensive to borrow money now, and hopefully the interest rates start coming back down, and then we can talk about it. But there's, you know, some way we have to think about paying for the Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk besides borrowing money or taking money off the townships. Now, I noticed in this CIP that they spread that out $2 million a year over, what, 3 years?
Yeah.
But still, that's a lot of money. They still don't know how they're gonna come up with that money. So I hate to get to the point where they sign anything and we don't know where that money's gonna come from. So those are the items, the issues that I had, that my comments on the CIP are. Doug, do you want to talk about your comments?
Yeah, and I'll just talk about, well, big picture, we're looking at this tonight because we got the recommendation from the executive committee last week. And you're gonna get another opportunity to look at it on May 10th. And at the May 10th meeting, you need to finalize comments and send them back to the executive director for May 11th. And I think that's when finance is meeting again.
Yeah,
So
May 11th. It's another joint meeting.
yeah, so they did make some changes based between the finance committee that when Larry spoke and the executive committee that Elliot saw this document. There were some changes made to the CIP, and what you had in front of you is what came out from the executive committee. So I had some comments about some specific items, and mostly they had to do with out-year things, nothing really for what's coming up for 2024, but more for 2025 and out. Some of it had to do with, seemed to be a tendency for them to collect money without any real identified need for it in the out years. So just asking them to clarify that. And that occurred both in several, like three of these funds, mostly related to parks. Under the Regional Nature Center, as Larry had noted, they spread the boardwalk costs out over 3 years, as Larry noted, but they put the revenue in under this line that's labeled loan/grant/gifts, which, you know, if it's a loan, it has an impact on us in one way, which is makes us responsible for it. If it's a gift from somebody else, then we're not responsible for it.
Right.
So my request was just separate that out and, tell us what you think. At this point, the point of a CIP is to have those discussions. Do we want to do it as a loan? That's a policy decision for the elected officials to say, and they can say yes or no. And if they want to do part of it as a loan, that might be an answer, or if somebody at Parks and Rec thinks they're really going to go out and get gifts and grants, then they should identify that, a certain percent of this is going to be financed through gifts and grants.
Right.
to set, so everybody understands what the expectation is, because otherwise, we're gonna say, well, yeah, it's gonna be gifts. That sounds good. And other people are gonna say, well, it's gonna be a loan, so.
And I could tell you who's going to say
Yeah,
what.
so I mean, my request was just, separate those. Those are three different, really different revenue sources, and they each deserve their own line. So, with that, if there's any questions, I'll try to answer them, but, again, if you have questions, we'll try to answer them. If we can't answer them, we'll shoot them up to COG and see if we get an answer back, by the next meeting, but by then, at some point, we'll have to come to consensus comments to send back to COG.
Does anybody have any thoughts on this?
I think that's how we got in trouble last year regarding parks.
Well, that was people approving expenses that weren't really in a budget anyway.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's a problem.
First we were thinking about we were going to get donations, then we were going to get gifts, and none of this transpired, and then we had a problem. So I'm with you, Doug. Break it down, explain it. Don't put it in all in lumped in one and don't have answers.
Yeah.
So my understanding of our CIP is if we put in that we're going to do something at Burnell Road, if we put a grant associated with that, if we don't get that grant, we don't do it. We don't just then flop it over and say, we didn't get the grant, we're going to borrow the money. And that's what that looks like to me. When they say loans / grants / gifts, they're saying, hey, look, if we don't get gifts or grants, we're just going to borrow the money. And I think those are two separate conversations you have to have. And when he said that, we're of course going to look at it and say, oh, you're getting grants and gifts. They're going to look at it and say, oh, we're just going to loan. It's much easier for them to get a loan than it is to go out and get grants and gifts. So we need to separate that, and they need to identify, is it going to be a loan or not?
And if they didn't get the grants and then try to just say, well, pay for it using a loan, we would need to approve that, or?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but, if you approved a CIP that had that in there, I wouldn't, the CIP is really a planning document. It's there to help you all work with staff to say, this is what we think we can do in the next 5 years. That's why one big difference between our CIP, I think, and COGS, and if you go back and look at the Patton Township one, Larry does not only estimates of what our capital needs are for the next 5 years, Larry also does what are our operational costs needs going to be for 5 years. So we're predicting our entire 5-year budget, revenues and expenses for 5 years. And then we go to the actual additional step to say, this is the tax rate that's going to be needed to support
That's why
those.
we do that, so that we know whether we're going to be
At
looking
that point,
at
and the parameters that we look at are, do we want to raise taxes? And do we have enough money left at the end of each of those 5 years to feel comfortable that we have, cash reserves, sufficient cash reserves.
Pandemic.
Our 8 to 12%, and it varies. But, we're always shooting to get it down to 8 to 12%. So, that's our CIP, and, we're fairly lucky. We're really lucky that, for the most part, we can do almost all the stuff that staff thinks we need to do and the board thinks we need to do. Generally, we can afford, we find we can afford to do that over 5 years. A couple of times we haven't. We've taken things that are in the next year, and we push them out a year or two. Hardly anything ever gets dropped. It mostly just gets pushed out a year to a future year. But that's what really the CIP ought to be, is let's have a large discussion over what we want to do and whether we can afford it or not.
And how we're going to fund it.
Yeah, and it's a harder, I mean, it's a harder discussion to have at COG than it is here, but I think, you know, my comments to COG for the last, I think, 5 years has been, look at our CIP and do something like that. So everybody has an idea of, you know, what are the real financial ramifications for doing these things down the road, so.
So we're not bound by, so in approving a CIP, again, we're just signing off on whatever framework that they have, and then down the road, we would be.
Yeah,
still
but I
willing
mean,
to
if there's a
approve.
$2 million line that says grants or loans.
Yeah.
Let's find out
So,
what it is.
so that's what I'm, find out what
I
it
don't
is.
think you really want to go down the road like that. I mean,
Oh,
you want
yeah.
to say, you know, do we want to, you know, do we think we want to borrow this money? And then obviously there's a ramification that unfortunately they don't even talk about. There's debt service that has to be paid. You know, so $2 million loan is probably going to run you $400,000, you know, for $2 million for 20 years, probably going to run you a couple $100,000 a year.
Definitely.
Yeah, or more, probably like 225 or 250 now, because interest rates are
Exactly.
double, triple what they were 3 years ago.
At some point in time, Sultan, you gotta have the conversation. How are you gonna fund? Are you funding it by a loan, or are you funding it by a gift?
Or a pay-as-you-go, I mean.
Or a pay-as-you-go? And the reason why you do this document is so we have that discussion now. Not that we approve that we're gonna do the Millbrook Marsh at $2 million a year, and then we're gonna talk about later how we're gonna fund it. No, tell me how you're gonna fund it now, and if you can't fund it that way, then we'll have another discussion. Like I said, our CIP, you know, we talk about how are we gonna fund something. If we can't fund it through a grant, or if we can't fund it through, you know, then we have to open up the discussion to talk about, are we gonna fund it through general fund, a pay-as-you-go? Are we gonna borrow money like we did with the open space? We borrowed money for that.
Then our CIP then goes in and puts the debt service back in.
Yeah, exactly.
Says now you've got 20 years to pay.
Because now we have to pay that.
Yeah, well, this is helpful for me because initially I was leaning very much toward being very conservative, and I was like, I don't know if we should hold our feet to the fire right now, but in hearing this process, it's like this is the time that we actually
This is
do
the
that.
time you should hold your feet to the fire.
And so,
That's
yeah, I
exactly-
mean, my initial thoughts are, as soon as I heard you say, like, we would need to raise taxes as well as this steep, increase from 24 to 25, I'm like, we're not gonna do that. And as well as like taking out loans and stuff right now, it's a very tenuous situation in our economy, and I'm not trying to take out loans for projects that I don't even know the importance of them, or, if it's, financially viable. So for me, I'm in agreement with everything that you're saying right now. We need some figures. I don't like that jump from 24 to 25. That's going to need to come down. I know you had talked about potentially thinking about how can we spread this out across time, and I'm still wondering the numbers, can we?
Yeah, we have to look, like Doug said, we don't want to, COG loves this. I argue about it all the time. Why should our money be sitting in the bank at COG? I want our money to be sitting in the bank here. Why should COG be vacant?
Or even sitting in our residence
pocket, yeah. There's no reason why we should be paying them money to sit in a bank that they're planning on using 8 years from now, because there are some things that their fund balance continues to go up.
The taxpayers should be able to keep their money until we need it.
Taxpayers should be able to keep their money until we absolutely need it, and I agree with that. So, and remember, this isn't a whole process at COG. We start with the CIP. The CIP rolls into the program plan. The program plan rolls into the budget. And that's where we run into the problem with the whole budget process that we ran into last year with COG, is that we do the CIP and everybody says, oh yeah, that's great. it rolls into the program plan, everybody looks at the program plan and says, yeah, I like that idea, I like that idea, I like that idea. As I said a million times, everybody's looking at a piece of the pie, but not looking at how big the whole pie is, you know? And then it gets to the budget, and then we see the whole pie. And last year, you know, our eyes went, oh my goodness, how in the world could we ever absorb this cost? And I'm trying this year to bring to everybody's attention, hey, look, these numbers mean something in October when we do the budget. Yeah, we're looking at something here in April, but it means something for us when we do our budget in November. All these numbers that we're looking at increases are all going to pop into our budget, and we have to cover those. Because once we say okay to COG, then we're on the hook. We can't say to COG next year, sorry, I don't have the money to pay you.
Well, I wasn't at the meeting in March, but I was briefed well about this problem, and then I expected the discussion to occur at the meeting last week. And other topics were discussed, but the only thing we discussed about this was that we're not talking about it just yet, and that we're canceling the general forum meeting, which we did. So it's extremely important for us to have that discussion very carefully during May.
I urge everybody to look at it, come back next meeting with some comments, so that when Dan and Betsy and I attend the joint meeting on the 11th of May, that we have some comments that we can go back to them with. Of course, I'll have comments, because I'm not going to be quiet at all this year about any of this.
For sure, and I think, again, given my naivete, and I'm still learning about this stuff, but in listening to you, Larry, you know, the words that come to me right now are restraint and responsibility. And it seems like there's been a lack of restraint, if I'm just thinking about the collective, and the responsibility piece, thinking through, like, we need to be able to project and look forward and be responsible for our own municipalities, but the gestalt, the sum, right? And maybe this is like a sort of like, I don't know, ethics or values or something like that, that maybe we need to discuss and come to some common values as we all engage in this type of process, and that we need to think about restraint and responsibility, because as you're speaking to, I don't want to get to, you know, down the road in October or whenever, and we're all like, where in the hell did this thing come from? And so making it clear that it's not just you, Larry, who has these concerns, but I think this is a process shared by, I mean, the board didn't say that, we all agree with that, but that this is coming from.
And I think it's a concern shared by other finance directors. I don't think I'm out there on my own. And it's something that, you know, we're still working on a fund balance policy for COG, and I think they definitely need a fund balance policy for COG, so that we can somehow give COG the minimum amount of fund balance that they need, the minimum amount of cash that they need. So then we could have the minimum amount of cash that we need, so that the residents can keep their funds in their bank as long as possible.
So Larry, how long have you been here? So I know you asked for the back history, going back to 20.
How long does it feel like I've been here?
Well, I'm wondering what the recent history has been. Before
Yes,
2020.
so I've been here since 2015. I've been here 8 years.
So have you seen a change between 2015?
Oh, it goes up every year. I said that, you know, Joe always talked about smoothing, and when I talked to Joe Viglione, I said, yeah, I'm okay with smoothing, because I think smoothing like this, and you think smoothing is like this. You know, it's a smooth uphill with them. And, you know, it could be smooth 10% a year, or it could be smooth 2% a year. Our real estate tax revenues generally are between 1.5% to 2% increase a year here. That's pretty smooth, but it's a smooth at 1.5% to 2% increase. COG is a smooth at 5% increase. Well, you can't, you're developing a gap there.
So it also strikes me as a mindset. The word that comes to my mind is OPM, other people's money. And I'm not saying, I'm not pointing a finger at COG, but that's the mindset, right? And then
Well,
COG can
I've often
ask us-
made the comment about, for instance, parks, where, it's much easier for the former parks director to come to 6 municipalities, 5 actually, because Half Moon wasn't involved in it. 5 municipalities that ask for money than it is to go out and ask for money from the hundreds of people that are using their programs. So it was much easier for them to come to us and say, we need more money. And many years at the budget, I would say, because my soon-to-be former township manager used to say to me, have you thought about increasing the charges, the fees to the participants of park programs? So I used to say that every year, used to get the response back that Doug told me I would get, which is, oh, I can't increase the fees. And I used to respond, as Doug told me, do you have waiting lists? And she would say yes. I said, well, I'm sure those people in the waiting list would be more than happy to pay more money than the current people just to get to be the current people. But it was much easier. It's much easier to ask the townships for that money. It goes through the finance committee. The finance committee approves the budget, which is the increase of the money that they're getting from the township. It goes to the general forum. It gets increased, and boom, we're on the hook for 5% more. So you're right. I think it's an other people's money mentality.
I think there's also the mentality of what the citizen sees and appreciates, and the parks maintenance is very visible. It's very tangible, and a lot of people use it. That's why a lot of people like it. We know that. Fire apparatus is not.
No.
Right.
And
those budgets are about the same.
I don't deny that we have to put money away every year for fire apparatus. And a fire apparatus, a fire truck is, $1.5 million. So it's not something we want to pay for in 1 year. I understand that. But I think that we need to take a closer look at what money we're putting away and how much each year. So I'll get down off my soapbox.
Well, another thing with park development, when people go to a park, the first thing they do when they walk into the park is they don't say, wait a minute, they said 3 years ago they were going to put this certain thing in, I don't see it. You use what's there to the best, and the people maintaining it do it to the best of their abilities, of everybody, but there are limits. And I don't think people complain in advance about what's at the parks, as long as they're well kept and
safe, safe.
Yeah, safe.
And I would much rather hear from residents who are complaining about increases in fees, that they're coming to the meetings and actually participating in that process, rather than there be this sort of initial gatekeeping anyway of parks saying, well, we can't do that to them, and so give us more money. So
I think it's a balance.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think if people should pay more fees, and we should have a little bit more as we have more parks. I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay anything of it, but I think there is a balance that has to be. And right now, it's heavily weighed on on the municipalities.
So, I mean, the way I would look at it is, you know, you have a parks program that does something, whether it's swimming lessons or whatever. So those are there's a set of users that are, you know, there might be a couple hundred users.
Right.
So they're paying fees that pay for part of it. Well, when COG comes and asks the municipalities to increase our contribution because these programs cost more, it's really asking all the non-users to pay more money so that these users can continue doing what they're doing. That's why, you know, yeah, municipalities should pay more, well, but we should pay, everybody ought to pay more, including the users. And there was always a reluctance that, well, we'll send the users away if we don't have, if we raise fees. Well, yeah, everything we do is a balancing act.
Right.
You know, that really, even in good years, we don't really get to do everything we want to do. So it's every financial decision we make is a balancing act between, you know, what do we have and what do we need to do? And our list of needs to do is, you know, Ken's got 20 on his list, and Tyler's got 20 on his list, and Alex has got 30 on her list, maybe 20. And, you know, Larry's got a few on his list, and the rest of us all have our own list. So, you know, the Millbrook Marsh Boardwalk, yeah, it's a good thing, but it's one of maybe 100 things that we do. So we're balancing that against all the other things we do. I think sometimes some of the folks at COG get a little tunnel vision. You know, that boardwalk, you know. We don't spend $7 million in a year on anything. Not even fire service do we spend $7. Probably the only thing we come close to spending $7 million a year on is police services for the whole community.
The whole region.
Yeah. So, you know, for somebody to say, you know, we're going to spend $7 million on one parks project, it's just not, that's not realistic. So somebody's just not paying attention to what's going on in the real world too, so.
Yeah.
So we have this, this is the CIP, it was in our packet this month, and we've been asked to hold on to this. Any of you who want to add some comments before the next exec meeting, I'm all ears.
Or if you have detailed questions, you know, you say, what's this mean here in one of these charts?
Well, letting them know, I mean, at least for me, I'm looking at it more closely now, and I know there's been some municipalities that's been a little bit more difficult in green lighting some of this stuff, and I have sensed that we've been obviously, you know, intentional about, you know, and informed about, you know, our votes and stuff like that. But moving forward, like I'm not going to be green lighting stuff just to do it.
Dan's been very good on the finance committee. He's very good at reading through everything, and him and I have had discussions so that we're coming from the same position when we get to the meeting. So.
Elliot, I just have one question. Larry, I know they may go to a deaf ear if you're saying it, but just like the township managers got together and they went to a committee meeting, and the finance directors all were combined, that all of us started to listen. So if they don't listen to you, maybe getting all the directors of finances, and you have your support of this board, I can say, you know, with Dan being on finance and Betsy, and you have the support. So
yes, usually at the finance committee meeting, all the finance directors, or a majority of the finance directors, do attend. And we do tend to speak with one voice.
Okay.
So sometimes on the little fringes of it, we'll have disagreements because, you know, 100 accountants will tell you 100 different ways to do something. But the overall idea that we want to rein COG's finances in a little bit, I think is an agreement that every finance director has. So When I spoke at the meeting earlier this month, I was getting a lot of feedback from my colleagues, and saying, yeah, they agree with me. So,
Great.
all right?
Thank you.
Keep it up.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have anything on this item? We don't have to vote on it, but let's hold on to our papers on this. Update for Center Region Rental Housing Building and Safety Code.
This is another issue this is the introduction tonight, and we got a couple our staff comments that we want to talk to you about. But this is an update that happens on a semi-regular basis. The last two times this code was updated is in 2010 and 2017. This really is the regulations that cover rental housing mostly, but it also includes many other things that are related to the function that Center Region Codes Administration performs for us. As you know, they're the ones that are responsible for permitting and inspecting building construction. They oversee the rental housing permit program. They do every commercial building in the region has a fire permit, so they do fire inspections on depending on what classification your building is. It might be every year, or it might be every 2 or 3 years. I think we're on a 3-year cycle. We're a low hazard operation. So they do rental housing inspections on a 3-year basis. So as noted, this goes through regular updates, and a lot of it's fairly mundane, let me put it that way. They did change the name this year to actually use the term rental housing, so everybody understands where to go. So that's one of the changes. There's a few other, as I noted in the bullet points at the bottom of page 7, there's a clarification about appeals from the Housing Code Board of Appeals, updates to definitions, rewrites to sections 703 and 704, about various things that have to do with fire resistance and national standards that come out of the National Fire Code. There's a couple, and you go to page 8, 2 things that, one caught my attention, and another one that caught Tyler's attention. In Chapter 9, which is the Fire Code, there was a mention that they wanted to bring in appendixes from the National Fire Code. Appendixes are optional parts of the code that can or cannot be adopted. And when I asked Walt to send me those appendixes so I could see what they were, there are parts of appendixes of the code that we've actually had discussions about at least twice in the last 20 years. One was in 2003, and the other one I think was in 2014. We had sat with the fire department and codes folks and looked at several of these things. A couple of these appendixes, one has to do with fire hydrant spacing, which we regulate through our SALT subdivision and land development regulations, and we had very extensive discussions about it back in 2014. So this appendix with fire hydrant locations contradicts what we already have. It actually requires fire hydrants much closer together than what we've all decided was safe for the last 20 years. So to put something in this code that contradicts with our subdivision code would be, it's not something we want to do. We want to keep those regulations in our subdivision and land development regulations. So my recommendation, and there was also had something to do with street regulations, how wide streets need to be, how big cul-de-sacs need to be, things like that, that again, we have discussed extensively in the past. So I told Walt, really need to pull those things out and discuss them as land development issues, not as part of a property maintenance code or a rental housing code. So that was comment on that. And then the other issue, I'll let Tyler talk about a little bit, is Chapter 11 and alarms.
Yeah, so Chapter 11, emergency alarms, the proposed document that came from code really kind of changes the procedure of how we do things now. Issuing licenses and permits has always been code's responsibility. The township does not issue any licenses for anybody selling or servicing an alarm system or permitting for, say, an individual wants to have an alarm put on their home. The code office has always dealt with that. However, anytime there is a fire alarm or a burglar alarm, the police get dispatched to that. So our officers are responding, and for instance, for a burglar alarm, our officers will go there and determine if it's a legitimate alarm. If somebody came up maybe after hours and pulled on a door and the alarm activated, the alarm did what it was supposed to do, that's considered a legitimate alarm. We've had alarms before where businesses are celebrating something or having a promotion. They have balloons inside, and when the air or the heat kick on, it moves the balloons around and it hits that beam and sets off the alarm. That's a false alarm, right? So we go to every alarm though. Our officers will investigate, and then in the narrative of the reports, they'll determine what the cause was. So our staff then keeps track of, and if we have a false alarm, we send a letter to the homeowner or the business to advise them, hey, this was a false alarm. We respond on this date, this time. This is what we found. You get 3 free, and then after that, we have a fee schedule. We start to charge. Ours is $75 for the 4th, $150 for the 5th, and then $300 for each subsequent alarm after that. And generally, obviously the point of the alarm is to work with the person or the business to make sure that, maybe you need to contact your alarm system, your alarm company. If there's some type of an issue, it's now the time to try to get that worked out. So we do have officer time and staff time involved in collecting this information and then distributing the letter. So one of the concerns that I had was not necessarily, again, with the licensing or the permitting. I think that's a great place for code to deal with that section of it. But the section getting into false alarms and the nuisance alarms, I just questioned if we should maybe consider continuing to keep that an in-house responsibility for our agency. Number one, we have to provide information to code. So we have to be kind of careful with what information we can provide to them. We can't just give them a police report, particularly if it includes a homeowner's information, so their name, their date of birth, sensitive information that we just can't disseminate freely because of the restrictions for that. Number two, and I did ask this of codes, and I said, well, will the municipalities receive any of the fine money? Because currently, if we get to the point where we start to fine them, the Patton Township receives that money. And the answer was no, that the codes office would be the ones who, since we're sending them the money or sending them their information, they are sending out the letters to the business of the homeowners, the money goes to codes. And just for some perspective, over the last 2 years, that's almost $15,000 worth of revenue we have in the township. Last year was $7,650. So that was just some of the concerns I had right out of the gate. We do have a chiefs meeting this Friday, so I planned on bringing it up with the other center region chiefs just to see kind of where they stood on it. But I wanted to make the board aware of those things.
Yeah, so that revenue comes and helps us, for all the time we spend following up on those alarms, those false alarms, that helps, that covers the cost for us doing that for the homeowner. So it's mostly a matter of process that we would have wished code had reached out a little earlier to the police departments and had this discussion before they brought it. So I think Tyler's point is we just need to have a big process discussion, and see really where is the best place to keep this item. So ultimately, we'll see where code goes. We'd like them to pull both these sections at this point and talk about them separately, so that they can do the other updates by July 1st if they want. Ultimately, if they don't, the township has one of the unique things about this property code is we can just say we're going to opt out of certain sections. We already do that with a few sections, but You know, for this section, if for some reason they don't pull these sections for additional discussion, the board could approve everything but those sections. So again, we'll have, this will be probably on the next agenda and could be on another agenda after that, depending on where we go. So.
One thing that would help me, let's say we agree with all the things you're saying about this and agree with those concerns. I forget exactly what our voting sequence is on these things, whether it's the exec committee or whether it's...
Well, every municipality adopts this because it becomes like one of our own ordinances. So it goes in, if you look in our code of ordinances, it'll say whatever the title, and then it will say refers to this document. This document, if you want to go find this document, it's on the code webpage. I don't think we have a link to it on ours, but we could. It's one of those kind of obscure things. If you don't know, if you look in our code for stuff and you can't find it, and unless you know for sure it's in here, like the regulations on open burning. If you want to have a fire pit in your backyard, actually the regulations for open burning are in this document. They're nowhere else to be found, but they are in here. So that's why, you know, it's not the best thing, but this is where it is. So there's a few other oddball things like that end up in here that everybody does. You know, but things like changing requirements for street widths and things like that should not be in here. You know, I think code really needs to have a deep discussion with the police chiefs about what it really means to respond to false alarms and all that stuff. And, you know, what that revenue really is, you know, really is intended to. It comes back to cover our costs to follow up on all that. So you know, we're not doing it as a moneymaker by any means. You know, ultimately, you know, if you're having a lot of false alarms, we want to let you know, give you a little incentive to go talk to your alarm supplier to get it figured out, so you don't have that happen. So,
Betsy, look for you.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Do you have good luck collecting fines from false alarms?
So that's another piece of it, to be honest with you, that I spoke with codes about too, is we really have a good network established. Certain businesses, we've had some trouble in the past, but we've made connections with like district managers or different places that we say, hey, we had another one, and they take care of it for us. So Mary Albright, our police secretary, does an absolutely fantastic job of staying on top of these and tracking them down. So,
I noticed it is often a large section of the police report. It's a false alarm.
Yes,
okay.
yeah, yep.
And
So specifically, I want to avoid inadvertently voting for the wrong thing. So if we approve whatever we're going to approve, that's what we're going with.
well, we can, and when we write our ordinance, if you want to opt out of Appendix B of the fire code, we'll just say we're not going to enforce part of our ordinance and say we're not going to enforce that part of this code. There's, as I noted on the front, there's sections 302.11, 702.61, and 807 we do not enforce. One of those has to do with trees on private property. One has to do with fire egress from the third story of single-family homes. And 807, I think, has something to do with the size of bedrooms in rental housing, because there was, at one point, the borough wanted to make more stringent size requirements for bedrooms in rental housing than other municipalities.
So Amy will have those notes when we talk.
Pardon?
Amy will have those notes.
Yeah, that's why I put them right on the front of this copy. So that was stuff I added, that didn't come from code, I added that stuff, so. So again, ultimately, you know, any of these things, you know, staff, you have to rely on staff to give you information, but I think you're gonna find, you know, we're gonna explain why, we're gonna tell you why these things should be in or shouldn't be in. Okay. At this point, we just think we should have discussions about them, but they need to be a broader discussion and outside of the scope of this at this point. And hopefully that's a general consensus of everybody and just gets pulled out.
And so are we going to vote on it in one lump? Vote?
At one point, at some point in the future.
Okay.
Sometime in May or June.
Okay.
I guess it doesn't have, there's nothing magic about July 1st, but there are some new updated international codes and building codes that this incorporates. It'd be good to have it in place before the students return in August.
Okay. So I have a day-to-day procedural question about code. I get a lot of questions about ordinances in our township, and I will send people to the E-code patent. But now you're telling me that that might not be enough, that I need to be aware of this other set of codes on the code website, which is fine.
Yeah, I mean, we can put it on, we can put a link on our website too.
And then other than that, they would call Nicole, the code?
They could,
Okay.
yeah.
But I'm trying to avoid that.
I mean, if it's really a rental housing issue, they should call Codes Administration at COG, because they do all the permitting and inspection. We do a little bit of the permitting, just to make sure that if somebody's doing a rental, that it's compliant with our zoning regulations.
Okay.
So like in R2 district, which is single family, Park Forest, you can rent out a room, or you can rent out the whole house, but you can't split part of your house out and make it a separate apartment in the R2 district. So that's the kind of thing that Nicole checks.
Gotcha. Just, thank you.
Anyone else on this?
So again, if you have questions, comments, get with us, and this will be on a future agenda also.
Okay, now we're up to 8, the consent agenda.
4 items, a grant application, minutes from the last meeting, settlement agreement for a real estate tax appeal, and a few appointments for Amy Farkas for when she starts as the township manager on May 8th.
That's after the next meeting.
Pardon?
She starts,
Yeah, for the next meeting, I'll write the agenda, but she'll be sitting here.
Okay, all
And I'll
right.
be sitting in the office, in the audience next to Betsy Dupuy.
That'll be nice.
okay. So did anybody, I forget if we, is it-
Yeah, we need a motion.
we didn't need a motion on whether to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, managers report.
Thank you. There was a letter of support I wrote to CATA for, trying to get my information. Yeah, letter of support for CATA that I wrote for a grant that they're applying for, low and no emissions for buses, new buses. There were several thank yous from nonprofits that we made contributions, that the board approved contributions for at the last meeting, so I included those also. Spongy moth updates. We sent out postcards to everybody in the spray blocks. We've got a few phone calls, not many at all, but a few. And we'll be reaching out to to our contractor who's going to do the aerial application. We'll reach out to them next week and start talking about firming up a spray date for later in May. Once we know that spray date, we'll do another blast of information through email and social media, and there'll probably be a couple ads in the CDT. Those going to run next week, Ken, or start next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sophie and Ken have been working on getting that stuff set up. So we're in good shape. We're in good shape, and we'll be spraying sometime, what we tell everybody, last 2 weeks in May. It depends on how fast the oak trees push out their leaves and when the little critters start popping out of the eggs and all that, so. Another thing on the Georgetown sinkhole grant, we submitted to get the cash, the money actual, so it's in process. We should have it in hand probably within 30 days or so. I did reach out to Delta Development, and they're providing us some assistance at a cost to help put the grant, distribute the grant money. So I've been working with Teresa Sparacino there, putting together we'll send out a request for information to all the owners and get some owner back on, what the costs they've incurred, and then probably, hopefully, maybe at the next meeting, we'll have a short discussion on how the board wants to distribute that funding. But Teresa and I are working on the details of that, so moving forward.
I want to thank Pam again for really getting the ball rolling on that.
Yeah, by doing this needs, why we
Start.
figure out what everybody's got their expenses. If we find out $180,000 doesn't cover it, then Pam says she's got the governor's ear, so. Township schedule will be closed May 29th, June 19th, and July 4th, and municipal primary election is May 16th. That's the end of my report.
Vote early and often. Okay, so now we're up to committee reports, right? Yes. Anything more than we see here on the committee reports?
I have an addition. The Parks and Recreation Governance Special Committee met this morning. We had earlier this year requested that Eric Norenberg, Executive Director of COG, reach out to try to identify a potential facilitator for our committee. Just to remind everybody, our committee met all last year, and frequently our meetings got bogged down in too much detail, and we weren't focusing entirely on the big picture. So we felt we needed an outside person to come in and help us through this big picture process. So today, this morning, a potential facilitator had stepped up and actually sent her qualifications. Her name is Hess, Nancy Hess, and she has worked with COG before when they were doing their employee manual updates and revising their employee manual. She helped that group with that whole process. She talked to us about what she could do for our committee. We said go ahead. It gave Eric direction to go ahead and negotiate with her about fee and so forth, and get back to the Finance Committee, because we removed a line item for facilitator for this committee from the budget last year, from this 2023 budget, when we had our budget discussions last year, we cut everything back. So we'll find out at our next meeting what Eric has come up with. Actually, it'll be on the agenda for the Finance Committee meeting in May, I'm sure, and we'll see. But so at that point, we didn't have any further need to have our committee continue to meet this morning. So it's our continuation is pending the implementation of a facilitator to help us through the process. I'm sorry it took so long to explain that, but that's just, I wanted to give you an update where we stood with that committee.
Yeah. Dan, how often are y'all meeting?
Once a month, the fourth Wednesday of every month.
And is it common for committees to have facilitators?
No.
Sometimes
I'd be interested to see what the fee is.
Yes, yeah. Well, who knows? It may be when Eric makes a presentation to the Finance Committee and tell us what the fee would be, the Finance Committee may say, sorry, no, we didn't approve this in the budget, and unless you have some fund balance money you plan to spend, maybe we'll say no. Well, I don't know, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Does anybody have any other business to bring up? In that case, is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.